In this chapter, we're going to cover the three basic macroeconomic relationship. We will start with income consumption and income saving relationships. And we will look at also the relationship between interest rate and investment. At the end, we will look at the concept of multiplier. We'll develop the concept of multiplier and how they change, relating change in spending translate to a change in the output. Okay, and the last word of the chapter give you an illustration of how the multiplier work using a fictional situation to illustrate how the multiplier work. Okay, here are the concept we will cover, the content of the chapter, income consumption and income saving relationship. We'll look at the non-income determinant of consumption and saving. We will explore the relationship between interest rate and investment. We'll look at a determinant of investment demand curve, and we'll conclude with the multiplier. So, income, consumption, and saving. The DI, this stands for disposable income, represent the income after taxes. And that's the income that you can use or you consume or save, or consume a portion of it and save the rest. So what is not spending, what is not spent through consumption is called saving. So both consumption and saving are directly related to the level of income. I will show you the graph later. So we can make the following conclusion that household consume a large portion of the disposable income, right? And they spend a larger portion of a small disposable income than a large disposable income, right? And household save the smaller proportion of the small disposable income than a large disposable income. And you see the concept of a saving here happen when you consume, a household consume in excess of a disposable income. So the household save by borrowing money to consume or selling existing accumulated wealth or existing asset, because they consume more than the disposable income. The money had to come from somewhere. So either you borrow to consume because the consumption is greater than your disposable income, or you sell some of the accumulated asset of the previous period to be able to do that. So let's look at this graph over here that show you the consumption and disposable income of in the United States since 1993. So the data show you from 1993 to 2015. So you have the consumption and the disposable income. So each dot over here, each dot on the graph represent the consumption and disposable income in a specific year. So you have it from here, you have 98 all the way to 2018. So you have it all the way down here. And also you have the 45-degree line, which is the red curve that we have over here. So the line C, which is the blue one, is your consumption, and that shows you the relationship between consumption and the disposable income. So you can see that direct relationship between the consumption and disposable income. Okay, I alluded to the 45-degree line, which is a line that cut the graph in half, right? It represents all the points where consumer spend, the consumer spending is equal to the disposable income. So another way to say is your consumption is equal to your disposable income. You consume the totality of your disposable income. And if you are on the red curve, mean that your saving is zero because you consume the totality. That's equidistance. Right? The 45-degree line is equidistance, the consumption and disposable income. What that means is you consume the totality of your disposable income whenever you gravitate on the 45-degree line. So this table shows the consumption and saving schedule, and also give you the propensities to consume and to save. We'll talk about propensity in the slide to come. Okay. So how you read this table here is under column 1, you have the level of output here that coincides with the disposable income. So we know that the disposable income go two ways. You allocate it either to consumption or to saving. So these two together are equal to the disposable income. So in level 1, you can see that you consume more than the disposable income, and you have a saving of 5. Right? The average propensity, right, that give you, we define it later, but it's just the percentage of the income that you consume, right? The percentage of the income consumed, and the average propensity to save is a percentage of the income that is saved. And the marginal propensity is the proportion of the increase in your income that is consumed, right? And the average marginal propensity to save is the proportion of the increase in your income that is saved. Okay. So here, these figures show A, the consumption, and B, the saving schedule, right? It's the two part of this graph show you income consumption and income saving relationship, right? The saving schedule, which is a B here, is found by subtracting the consumption schedule A vertically from the 45-degree line to get this. So consumption here is equal to disposable income right here. So if the disposable income is, if the saving is at 0, so the disposable income is equal to the consumption, which is what we saw earlier here, because the saving is as 0. You see that the disposable income and the disposable income and the consumption are the same. Right, I represent this line over here. this junction over here represents that. So now let's talk about the average propensity. So the first one is average propensity to consume, which is APC, is the fraction, the percentage of your total income that is consumed. So how you come up with it, APC is the consumption divided by the total income, right? That's represent your APC, average propensity to consume, and the average propensity to save is the fraction, right? It's the fraction of the total income that is saved. So if your income is $100 and you are saving $25, it will be 25 divided by 100, which is 25%. So you are saving 25% of your income. So that means that the 75% of your income is consumed, which will be the average propensity to consume. So if you add both average propensity to consume and average propensity to save, equal 1, because the disposable income goes to where you allocate it either to consumption or saving. So this global perspective shows you the average propensities to consume for selected nation, right? So you can see that there are surprisingly a large difference between the average propensity to consume among nations. Right? In 2018, Canada, United States had a substantially higher average propensity to consume. Right? So if someone have a higher average propensity to consume, meaning that ultimately they have a lower average propensity to save. And note that if you add the APC and APS together is equal 1. Now that we define the concept of average propensities, let's talk about the marginal propensities. Right? So the marginal propensity to consume, MPC, is the fraction or the proportion of any change in the income that is consumed. So here we talk about change in the income. What is the impact of that change on the consumption? What is the proportion of that change that you are allocated to consumption? Same way, the marginal propensity to save is the fraction or the proportion of any change in the income that is saved. Again, here, if you add both marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save, you will get 100%, which is equal 1. So these figures show the marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save as the slope of the consumption curve and a saving curve. So the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, is the slope of the consumption schedule, and marginal propensity to save is the slope of the saving schedule. So the non-determinant of the consumption. So non-determinant of consumption and saving can cause people to spend more or save more or spend less or save less, and vice versa at various income level. Here, note that the income level is the basic determinant of saving and consumption. Beside the income, the other determinant of the consumption and saving are wealth, right? We have wealth. if you see increase in your wealth, the consumption schedule shift up and the saving schedule shift down, understandably. If your wealth increase, you don't have that need to save any money, so you consume. So that's why you see that if there's an increase in wealth, the consumption schedule will shift up. It will increase the consumption and decrease the saving. Right. So the reverse, right? The reverse wealth effect also can happen, right? We saw in 2000 and 2001 when the stock prices fell dramatically. Household debt, right? The lower debt level, it shifts the consumption schedule up. If you don't have a debt in your balance sheet, or you don't have debt to pay off, people consume more. So you will see that the consumption schedule will shift up, right? And saving gonna shift it down, right? So expectation change, if there's a change expected in the future, let's say you have a expected future prices to be better, right? You may want to hold on to your purchases until you get to those good price to consume, right? Same way with wealth also can affect consumption today. So if the expectation that you're going to be wealthier, so probably that will dictate how you spend your money today. Probably consumption will go higher in anticipation of that expectation. The real interest rate is another determinant, right? Declining interest rate increase the incentive to borrow, right, and to consume. So you see the consumption schedule gonna shift up, right? And that decreases the incentive to save because interest rate being lower, and nobody want to save, right? The people want to spend the money, so that decreases the incentive to save, and the saving schedule gonna shift it down. Other important consideration, the macroeconomic model focus on real domestic output more than disposable income. So we're gonna shift our analysis. Instead of disposable income, we shift it to real domestic output. So the figure on the next slide reflected this change in labeling the horizontal axis as the real domestic output. So we can see the same thing. Okay. So the schedule shift, we see that consumption and saving schedule will all shift in the opposite direction. If one shift up, the other one will shift it down. All will go into the opposite direction, right? Unless the change is caused by the shift is caused by tax change. The taxation, right? Lower taxes will shift above schedule, consumption, and saving schedule up, right? Since taxes affect both spending and saving, and the reverse is right for higher taxes. Higher taxes will shift above down, right? Stability here, economists believe that the consumption and the saving schedule are generally stable unless deliberately shifted by government regulation. If not, they tend to be stable. So we're gonna look at these figures here that show you the consumption and the schedule You can see here that we change our disposable income to real domestic output to be in the macroeconomic concept. So a household consume more at each level of real GDP, right? And they are necessarily save less. So you can see here that as if we shift the consumption from C0 to C1, when we decrease the consumption from a shift down from C0 to C1, so you will see that consequently the saving C0 to C2, the saving will shift up from S0 to S2, right? That inverse direction. And when the consumption is shift up from C0 to C1, the corresponding saving schedule shift down from S0 to S1. Interest rate and investment relationship. Investment consists of spending on new plant, capital equipment, machinery, inventory, add or reduction, construction, and etc. Investment decision, where the marginal benefit and the marginal cost are like what we alluded to in the previous lecture. The expected return, rate of return is the marginal benefit, and the interest rate represent the marginal cost. Okay. So we're gonna look at this figure over here that show that inverse relationship between the investment demand and interest rate. So this figure, which can be found in the book, you see that the investment demand curve is built by arranging all the potential investment project in descending order, right, of the expected rate of return. So the slope is downward, reflecting that inverse relationship between the real interest rate, right, and the quantity of investment demanded. So if you take interest rate as the cost to get those investment, as the cost going down, people will demand more investment. That's the rationality of this inverse relationship between the investment demand and the real interest rate. Right? So the interest rate defined as a cost. So if the cost do go down, people tend to demand more. So shift in investment demand. So all right, the determinant that can shift the investment demand. Shift in investment demand happen when any determinant apart from the interest rate change. A greater expected return create a movement or move the investment demand. So shifting the curve to the right, right? The reverse also will shift the curve to the left, the opposite. Change in expected rate of return happen because of acquisition, maintenance, operating costs, all those things add to the cost. So, and higher cost is lower return, because if you incur a lower cost, ultimately what you're gonna get from the investment gonna be lower, because you have to take all those costs out before you come up with your return. Technology, right? Technological change here often come out with a lower operating costs, which will increase the expected rate of return or expected return. A stack of capital good on hand will affect also new investment. So if you have, in this case, if you have excess capital on hand, you are not using it, so it won't be meaningful for you to invest in more capital, right? So abundant idle capital on hand, if you have that, you won't pursue any new investment because you already, and even if you do that, it won't be profitable. For you, it will be less profitable because you already have excess capacity. If a firm plan to increase inventory, right, and then investment demand will shift to the right, because if you plan to increase your inventory, you have to eventually increase your investment to be able to achieve that goal. If you plan to decrease inventory, investment demand shift to the left, because you need to decrease it. And plan inventory change based on expectation, right? Either you have an expectation of a faster sale growth or slower sale growth. So this figure shows you the shift of the investment demand curve, right? So an increase in investment demand I show here as the gradual shift. So that's the increase, it's shift from ID0 to ID1. That's the increase, and the decrease will be shift to the left. So investment, as you know, investment is a very unstable type of spending, right? IG, investment demand, is more, IG is more volatile than the gross domestic product. Expectation for future business condition easily and quickly change. So that makes the investment more volatile. So capital goods are durable. So spending on those type of goods can be postponed, right? Can be based on the economic condition, you can postpone it because those are durable goods. A firm can choose to replace fix the old equipment and building if the conditions are not good enough. Instead of invest a new one, they can decide to repair the existing one. Innovation occur at a regular pace, right? New product stimulate investment and create a wave of investment spending. And that in time can also recede. The profit affect both incentive and ability to invest. And that profit can change rapidly from year to year. Everything will depend on the business condition and how optimistic people are in the economy. So now we're going to talk about a multiplier effect. So what is a multiplier? Right. Multiplier just give you that the change in how the change in spending have that rip through effect throughout the economy. So the multiplier here is basically the idea of when you invest money into the economy, that money gonna trickle out throughout the economy to generate more output, more money than the initial investment. Okay, so the multiplier alluded to the fact that when you make a change in the spending, a multiplier, that change gonna generate a large change in real GDP. So that's the concept that we call multiplier. So multiplier is equal to the change in real GDP divided by initial change in spending. And you can rearrange it to come out with a change in GDP equal multiplier times the initial change in spending. Point to remember about multiplier is that the initial change in spending is usually associated with investment, right? Because of the volatility of the investment itself. But changing in consumption or unrelated to income, net export, government purchases are all subject to multiplier effect. The initial change refers to an upshift or downshift in aggregated spending schedule, right? And due to a change in one of his components, such as investment, the multiplier works in both directions, right? To destroy money or to amplify the initial investment. Okay, so here's one example of this figure just illustrate the concept of multiplier. All right, so here we look at the multiplier process with the marginal propensity to consume of 0.75. So an initial investment here of 5 billion create an equal 5 billion new income in the first round. So you inject it, that create income in the first round of 5 billion, right? And out of this 5 billion that you inject, people receiving it, if the assumption is MPC 75, it will consume 75% of this 5 billion and put 25% into the saving. So now as they consume this 75% of the 5 billion, which is a 3.75, that will become the new income that is injected into the economy. And out of this income, people are gonna use 75% of it as gonna consume 75% and save 25%. So this 2.81, which is the 75% of a 3.75, will become the new income. And again, the multiplier or the marginal propensity to consume of 75 applied to it, it will give a new income level. So if you keep doing all the way to the end, you will see that the initial investment of 5 billion give at the end 20 billion, right? Give at the end a larger a change in the output produced, the income generated, which is in our case 5 billion, translate change to 20 billion. And here you can deduct the multiplier. You see the multiplier is the change in the output divided by initial change. So that will be 20 divided by 5. That will give you 4, which is our multiplier in this particular case. So the multiplier and marginal propensities. So the significance of the multiplier is that a small change in investment plan or consumption saving plan can trigger a large change in the equilibrium level GDP. And the magnitude of the change in GDP is dependent on the size of the marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save. So here, this figure illustrates the relationship between the marginal propensity to consume and the multiplier. So if the marginal has increased the marginal propensity to consume, so the multiplier. So the multiplier also increased. So we have, our example was the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, was 0.75, and we have a multiplier of 4. So if the marginal propensity to consume shift to 0.8, you see the multiplier gonna be 5. So the actual multiplier effect. So the actual multiplier in United States is estimated to be between 2.5 and 0. So we're gonna ask a question, why the example, the simulation we have a multiplier of 5, and the reality we say that is between 2.5 and 0, which is a smaller. It's because in United States economy, there are other leakage from the spending stream, right? Besides just the saving. For instance, in any economy, you spend money on the import, and import, other country produce and send it to you. So anytime you spend money on the import, it doesn't do anything to the GDP, right? Because people from outside for the country produce those items that we import. Okay, so that's one thing, the import, either reduce the flow of money back into the spending on domestically produced output and reducing the multiplier effect. Also, increases in spending can drive up inflation as well. And higher price, any given amount of spending, we buy less output. So basically how the inflation will play out is if before the inflation, you use a set of money to move a set of a quantity of output to purchase those. Now with inflation, the same money gonna purchase less output, right? So the output produced, eventually that won't generate a lot of income, or that won't generate a lot of output produced because of we are purchasing less output. Eventually that will bottleneck the output produced, to the point that the producer will have to reduce the output produced because of people are not moving the expected output that they produce because of inflation. And the last word of the chapter, I have that humorous example of the multiplier when one person in a small town decide not to buy a product from a particular producer, right? And that one person decision create a ripple effect of throughout the economy by sending that non-spending, right? First decision, non-spending, create that ripple effect throughout the economy, and eventually the economy end up recessing, right? And we see the economy downturn. But the way it works is if one person decides not to purchase from a particular company, that company that didn't have that consumer to move his good, so he didn't sell it, so he won't produce it. So ultimately that a producer is gonna have to reduce his output because of they miss opportunity to sell the output to the first consumer, that make a decision not to purchase. So that involve the next in the line, the next producer, not to produce more because they cannot sell the item already on the shelf. So to make that decision, we know that the prices doesn't flex for people to buy. So that means that you reduce your output. The only thing you do when you reduce your output is to kind of cut down your manpower. So you see that if that they go to the third producer, the fourth producer, they're gonna create that ripple effect throughout the economy. And before you know it, the economy you're gonna see that downturn in the economy when the output gonna gradually decrease. And that's how we experience recessions.